So what we're looking at today in our thinking about money is interest, and specifically compound interest. That will all make sense a bit more as we go along. You may have heard of interest before. Let's talk about what it means. So banks like it when you keep your money in their bank accounts because it means they've got hold of it. So they like it. And if you are putting your money into a bank account or a building society, they will pay you some interest on this money. It's only a little bit, but every time you put money in, it will give you a bit more back. If you've borrowed money, though, from a bank, you have to pay them interest. Let's think a bit more about what that means. So it's calculated each year. So at the end of each year, it's worked out. And it's worked out how much either the bank owes you for interest or how much you owe the bank. And the amount of interest depends on the interest rate, which is a percentage. So for example, if the interest rate given by a bank was 5% and you had £100 in your bank account, then you would earn £5 interest at the end of the year, because 5 is 5% of 100. The way compound interest works is it means that each year you get a little bit more. So the amount of interest you've earned is added on to your starting amount. So let's look at this example. So if you had £100 in your bank account and your bank paid you interest of 2% at the end of the year, then you would get £102 because 2% of £100 is £2, and that's what it's added on. Which means that the next year your starting amount is £102, and 2% of £102 is actually £2.04. So you'd end up getting a bit more interest than before. You get £2.04 instead of just £2, and your total would be £104.04. And then the following year, you're going to be getting 2% of £104.04, and so on and so on. And with this example, £100 isn't really a huge amount of money, so you don't notice too much of a difference. We're only talking a few pence. But if you had a lot of money in your bank account, then over time, that interest would be a really decent amount of money. That's why when people win the lottery, sometimes people spend it, but other people might like to just put it in a bank account and earn loads of interest on it. Let's have a look at another example. You might want to pause the video and have a closer look. But what this is showing is if you had £500 in a savings account and the interest rate was 4%, you can see how you'd calculate it over 3 years. So after 1 year, you'd end up with an extra £20. And then after 2 years, it starts with 520. So then you get 4% of that and you end up with £540.80. And then finally, after 3 years, you'll have got £562.43. And the key thing to notice here is that we don't just add on 4% of 500 3 times. So after 1 year, we saw 4% of 500 was £20. But what we have to remember is that each year, that £20 interest is actually going to go up by a little bit, because the amount we start with each year gets a bit bigger. So if that's not clear, pause this screen and just have a little look and see if you can work out what it means when we say that we're not just adding on 4% of that first amount each time, because that starting amount gets bigger and bigger every year. So you're going to have some problems to try. You are allowed to use a calculator, and it was all to do with finding percentages of amounts. So just then we were trying to find 4% of the amount we started with each time. So have a look, if you're not sure, at my video on finding percentages of amounts as a bit of a recap. Now, when you look at these problems, you might end up feeling stuck. The first one is done for you to give you a bit of some help. But if you have really looked and you're still thinking, oh my goodness, I completely don't understand this, just work out the interest for the first year. So for example, here's the one that's done for you. It says find the compound interest when £400 is invested, that means it's in the account, at 7% for 3 years. And so we've got the first year would have 7% of 400 is £28, so added on, that's 428. And then the second year we start with 428 and add on 7%. Then we start with this and add on 7%, giving us our final number. And the actual answer then is how much interest was added. So we started with 400, we end up with 490 and 2 pence. So the compound interest that was added on was the £90 and 2 pence. So that's what you need to do. But if you're super stuck, you could just work out the interest after 1 year. But I think that most of you can have a crack at finding it after the amount of years that it says for each question. If you actually have done those 6 questions and you think, oh, that was all right, I want to try something else, there is another challenge here, which I'm not going to explain. I'm going to let you read it and work it out for yourselves. But it's all to do with if you borrowed money from a bank and the interest that you would have to pay them. So rather than the bank giving you interest, it's the other way around. It's you giving the bank interest.